Hey friends, thanks so much for joining us. Look, here's the thing. We talk to a lot of interesting people, and I feel very privileged to be able to do that. And today we have on the line somebody who's really been hitting the cover off the ball. It's Dave Kranzler from Investment Research Dynamics. Dave, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate the work that you're doing on a daily basis. Between Rory and I and Peter, we make sure we post all of it. Rory's on the line as well. How you doing, Rory?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Hey, I want to draw attention to your interview with Claudio Grass, which you posted over there at the Daily Coin, and we're featuring it at SGT Report. You guys will want to check that out. Rory's doing a good job getting great people on, trying to get to the truth of the matter. And Dave, I just wanted to read this quote from Paul Craig Roberts on your website, and it's this: "The Chinese and Russians are not running out of dollars with which to buy gold, but the Fed is running out of gold with which to make deliveries." End quote. I love it because that really sums things up. And Dave, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, but then I want to read something else that you wrote not very long ago. What do you make of the Chinese demand for gold in that Paul Craig Roberts quote?
I'll tell you, I mean, he hit the nail on the head. And the telltale here is the recent pronouncement from Germany that they were okay to leave their gold in the U.S. And what that tells us, there's huge political pressure over in Germany to bring back the gold that's supposedly being held by the Fed in the U.S. And the U.S. has coughed up 5 tons in the last year, and it was all scrap and coins that had to be melted and recast into LBMA type bars that central banks hold on to. So, as soon as I saw that article that said Germany was going to leave their gold in the U.S. for now, it told me right away that the only reason they're doing that is because the U.S. doesn't have the gold to send back to them.
Right.
And if the U.S. can't send back Germany's gold, it also means they don't have Italy's gold. I know Italy keeps at least 1,000 tons, theoretically, in the U.S., and it essentially means, I think, that the U.S. is out of gold. And I think what happened, to address the Chinese situation, I think, as we all know by now, what happened was when they took the price of gold down from $1,900 to just under $1,200, it triggered an avalanche of demand from China and India and the rest of the Eastern Hemisphere that I don't think the geniuses running our policy and our government, I don't think they anticipated that happening. And To me, I think the cat's out of the bag on the physical metal type thing. The Ecuador gold swap that they did with Goldman Sachs, and that was only 13 tons. I think that kind of is an indicator that the bullion banks and the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve are kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel to try and come up with physical gold that they can deliver.
Yeah, I think you're right. Andy Hoffman made a joke in his recent Miles Franklin podcast saying that Miles Franklin could have delivered Germany their 5 tons of gold. I mean, it's not that much gold. What is Germany asking? Germany wanted 300 tons of gold back, and 5 tons was all they could get in year one, and the Fed said it would take 7 years to give them all 300 tons, and now Germany's saying, nah, don't worry about it, we trust you, when all of the evidence suggests the absolute opposite, and everybody on planet Earth knows it. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff going on behind the scenes, but to your point, Dave, it is all in the open now. Everybody knows about this fraudulent central banking cartel and this fraudulent gold and the fraudulent paper. You wrote here on April 16th. I just want to read this real quickly to people. Shortly after the Shanghai gold market closed last night, the market manipulators went to work on the gold price. Gold was taken down another $20 during the morning trading in London, primarily in 3 high-frequency trading-induced mini-flash crashes. You go on to say, as soon as the COMEX floor trading opened at 8:20 a.m. Eastern, nearly 4,000 contracts were dropped instantaneously onto the floor and into the Globex system. This is over $500 million worth of gold, over 10 tons of paper gold, guys. 5 tons is all Germany could get back in a year. These guys dropped 10 tons of paper gold in a nanosecond, you write. This amount represents 47% of the amount of actual physical gold that was reported to be available for delivery by the COMEX, you write. All right, here's my point. On Wednesday, June 18th, Dave, we saw something very different that hasn't happened in a long time. Gold popped nearly $40, smashing through resistance at $1,300, ending the day around $1,314. We are definitely seeing this system spasm, and we're seeing evidence that this system is crashing. I just interviewed Karen Hughes, and she says this banking cartel is in the process of being defeated and will be defeated. What's your take? Do you think that's consistent with the reality you're seeing?
Well, I don't know if I would. I mean, it depends on who's doing the defeating. Just to briefly touch on that June 18th day that you referenced, what was interesting about that day was that there was a big spike up in the futures, in gold futures, 5 minutes before the COMEX opened up for trading. So 8:15 Eastern time, and the COMEX gold pit opens up at 8:20. And I didn't have a volume number on it, but it was I forget, it was like, I don't know, maybe like, it's in my blog, a $5 to $10 spike up. And that's something that we haven't seen in a long time, because typically what happens is they'll try to start the waterfall process around 8 a.m. Eastern time, so that when the COMEX opens up, it's not just the bullion banks that are dumping, but the technically triggered hedge funds then start dumping right at the open. And just the opposite happened there. And there wasn't any, I couldn't find, and no one I know could find any specific news or event trigger that would have triggered that buying. And so I thought it was kind of interesting. The only thing I could think of is maybe, China or Russia or someone went in there and put a huge bid in the market just to mess around with the COMEX. I don't know. That was a pretty remarkable day in terms of the way gold behaved, and it was certainly unexpected.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that silver also popped $1 that day. With gold popping, let's call it 38, I think was the official number. That's a silver to gold ratio of 1 to 38, when the paper market is valuing silver at 1/60th of the value of gold, and we know that they're only pulling silver out of the ground at 9 to 1 ratio. I just think that it's all interesting because, if I've said this before, Dave, if I can see the truth of what's going on here, and Rory can see the truth of what's going on here, and you can see it, and Paul Craig Roberts can see it, certainly all of the other governmental entities around the planet can see exactly what's going on. And what's going on is the process of the dollar dying. What's going on is this 40-year fiat empire is in the process of crumbling. We call it documenting the collapse. That's what we're doing. We're documenting the collapse, and we're documenting the loss of control of the Federal Reserve privately run banking cartel over this dollar and over the perception of what the dollar is by the rest of the world. This is a debt-based, death-based currency that operates under the cover and the cloak of darkness and secrecy, lies, and endless war. And I think the world is getting damn tired of it.
I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, that sums up the whole situation very well. And what we're seeing, getting back to kind of the defeated thing, part of what I think China's doing is, and there may be days when they actually help them manipulate the price lower, because they're happy to take all the physical gold that the West wants to sell them at these prices. And so they're not necessarily going to go on to the COMEX and juice the price higher just for the sake of getting the price higher. They don't care. They have a long-term outlook on how they view things. And they prefer to probably have a lower price as long as they can get physical gold delivered. Right. I personally think what we saw happen in June are signs that the U.S. is starting to run out of physical metal, at least at these price levels, with which they can deliver into China in large size. And actually, probably starting next month or in August, we're going to start to see India kick in a big way. And that could really spell trouble for the West, and if they haven't taken some sort of measures that we obviously wouldn't know about to prepare for it. And with silver, I think there's potential that the physical situation may be even worse, because when India slapped those import controls on gold, what happened was India substituted that by importing a bunch of silver. They imported a record amount of silver in 2013. And it was kind of right around the time that we were seeing big movements on a weekly basis in and out of the COMEX silver vaults, and also kind of strange movements in and out of SLVs. So I think that there's, it's impossible to prove, but it just kind of feels like the situation in silver may actually be worse than in gold.
Yeah, I believe that to be true. I think that there is much more paper silver in the market than paper gold. And we could use the evidence of Nicholas Larkin's statement in a recent Bloomberg article where he claimed that the annual silver market is worth $5 trillion, Dave, whereas in his words, the gold market is worth $18 trillion. Now figure that out. If we're going to mine, say, 700 million ounces of silver out of the ground on an annual basis, as I said in an interview where I cited that article, I said, well, let's round that up to 1 billion ounces. 1 billion ounces times $20 an ounce is $20 billion. You know how many times 20 billion goes into 5 trillion? 250. So Nicholas Larkin is saying the silver paper derivatives market is 250 times larger than the annual physical production and gross value of physical silver. It's stunning. And then he's claiming that the silver market is 1/3 as large as the gold market when the paper to gold ratio on silver to gold is 60-1. I mean, figure that out. I mean, I think the truth of what's really going on here is going to absolutely stun and shock people when it's finally revealed, when the physical prices are truly allowed to be determined by the market. When and if that day comes, I'm not sure, but I want to play this for you guys. Jim Willie sharing some powerful facts in his latest interview with True News and Rick Wiles. I just want to play this soundbite for you guys if you don't mind, because I think it speaks to the nature of the truth that is now being revealed, and people who were previously cautious about speaking of these things are now speaking of them openly. And it really speaks to the heart of the fact that these guys, the men behind the curtain, are being exposed. Listen to this.
And we got a bunch of neocons that control a good deal of the U.S. military policy. And neocon is just a nice word for neo-Nazi. So people need to wake up that when Bush Jr. hit the office of the White House and his gang of neocons came in with a lot of foreign passports, these were the Nazis. These were the neo-Nazis who brought us 9/11. I fully believe that they are key players behind the 9/11 attacks.
I wanted to share that with you guys because I've spoken with Jim Willie before. I've listened to a lot of his interviews. Sometimes he will dance around 9/11, and he is a 9/11 truther, but he doesn't often go into those types of details. But the fact that Jim Willie is willing to essentially finger the Zionist entity in control of the Pentagon and some branches in some areas of the White House on 9/11, I really think speaks to the fact that this house of cards is coming down. Because as we know, everything that they've rolled out in this country, the police state, the Department of Homeland Security, all of this unconstitutional apparatus has been rolled out in the name of 9/11, in the name of what happened that day. And what happened that day is completely different than most of the American sheep will suspect.
Well, the thing about, it's such a controversial topic, but the thing about 9/11, I mean, that's what triggered the passage of the Patriot Act. Patriot Act was actually drafted when Clinton was in office, so they just needed a false flag event to get the wheels in motion.
A catalyzing event, as I think the Project for a New American Century deemed it, a catalyzing event, and that's what 9/11 was.
It's a good way to put it. It's a good term for it. But it triggered the Patriot Act, the Homeland Security Act, and the Detainee Bill, which Obama has codified. He codified the Detainee Bill, and it also allowed them to attack Iraq, even though Iraq had no connection whatsoever to 9/11.
That's right.
And I actually do think that a majority of the people in this country don't believe the government story about 9/11. I think they suspect foul play, but I think people just don't like to go there because it's just such a controversial topic. I know if you go outside of the United States, A lot of European countries, the population, 80 to 90% of the population believes what we all think really happened. So, and I've spoken to people who were living in other countries, and they said that they were getting a completely different news picture, even on CNN, over in different countries, than we were getting fed over here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, to your point, it has been a dangerous topic, and people have lost jobs over the topic of trying to discuss what actually happened on 9/11. Certainly our listeners will recall that the Bush-Cheney administration did not want an investigation of 9/11, and it was only until the families pushed hard for an investigation that the 9/11 Commission was formed. And of course, the Bush administration wanted to put, as the chair of that commission, Henry Kissinger at the head of it, which caused the families to absolutely freak out because Henry Kissinger has a long history of being a war criminal and a servant to the bankers. So, yeah, I think it was part of the Great Awakening. What happened on 9/11 is part of the Great Awakening, and I think it plays into all of the things that are currently happening, Dave, because as we see, the GDP is now contracting, despite the fact the Federal Reserve says everything they've done has worked and the economy is robust, growing, and healthy. Now, we know the GDP just dropped by 2.9% in the first quarter of 2014. How in God's name, Dave, are they going to spin that? I mean, what we are seeing is an absolute meltdown of the economy, and why are we seeing that? Because these guys have abandoned any monetary principles that make sense.
Wasn't it the weather? I thought it was the bad weather during the first quarter.
Oh, was it? Oh, I didn't get that memo. Okay, scratch that. Everything's fine.
The more interesting question is if they were forced to report a 2.9% contraction, I wonder what the real contraction was.
Oh, we think alike. I thought the exact same thing. It's probably closer to 5%.
And the other, I do, my suspicion is, and I'll be pleasantly surprised if I'm wrong, I think they're going to rig a number that will take people by surprise to the upside for the second quarter. If they do, then we know it's just complete and total manipulation, but that's just my suspicion, because I don't trust these guys one iota.
Well, and and neither does anybody else on planet Earth. Rory, you had something you want to jump in?
Well, if they post a positive number for the second quarter, we'll call it 0.5%. That's 3.4% increase.
A 3.4% swing.
Yeah. How in the world is that even possible?
Well, it's not. You can't. Auto sales are slowing down. Housing starts are slowing down from the first quarter. Retail's slowing down. I don't know how they would justify it. I really don't. Unless they come up with some sort of, goofy manipulations due to Obamacare or something. Who knows?
Well, I mean, the entire market is an illusion. I mean, the stock market is an illusion. You've got high-frequency trading. You've got the plunge protection team in there supporting the Dow every time it goes down more than, 49 points or so. I mean, the whole market is an illusion. And with this number coming out showing the GDP is contracted or dropped 2.9% in the first quarter of 2014, it's just a great wake-up call for people. And I guess it makes me wonder, Dave, when will, and maybe people are, but in your estimation, what will it take for the American people, right, the sheeple that aren't listening to this interview and don't follow your work and don't go to Zero Hedge and don't follow, the alt media's truthful reporting, what is it going to take for these people to wake up? And the reason I ask is because in Australia, we see the Australian government now seizing what they call dormant bank accounts. Those are bank accounts that have been inactive for 3 years or more. We also see in Spain, according to Bloomberg and Zero Hedge, that Spain is now set to create a tax on bank deposits. And as Zero Hedge says, coming to an insolvent country near you, everywhere. This seems to be the new model, this model of banking austerity, or more, maybe more apt, this Cyprus seizing model, this MF Global thieving model, right? They're just going to take it. And I wonder what's going to happen when the American people wake up, because you got this fellow, Nick Hanauer, who's a billionaire, and he just recently came out with a piece saying, to my fellow zillionaires, wake up. The pitchforks are coming. I think the pitchforks are coming, but the question is, when are they going to come? When are the American people going to get fed up enough with this loss of rule of law and this trampling of the Constitution to stand up and actually do anything about it?
That's a good question. That's an issue that I contemplate all the time and talk about with other people. The truth is, the unfortunate truth is, I think the majority of people won't pick up their pitchforks until something really bad and painful happens. And I've started to come to the conclusion that it might actually not happen until the dollar actually collapses.
Right.
And people see that our country is essentially a third country masquerading behind debt, printed money, and fraud. And I do think a lot of people are aware of it. I just think that it's the bulk of human nature is to just take the path of least resistance. And so that's why I think people are just kind of, I think they look the other way and would prefer not to see it. Like the woman I'm dating, she'll read my blog and she knows in the back of her mind what the truth is, but she doesn't want to think about it because it's so horrific to think about, especially because she has an 11-year-old kid. So she doesn't want to think 5 or 10 years out to think about how really ugly things could get in this country.
Right.
Because she has a kid and she doesn't want to think about that.
Yeah, that cognitive dissonance is something that we all fight against as it pertains to our family, our friends, our colleagues, and it can be very frustrating because when you first wake up, you want to share information with everybody. You want to wake others up. And I've come to the conclusion, Dave, that it's impossible to wake others up. They need to want to wake up. You can't wake them up. It's a little bit like the movie The Matrix, which we've talked about with other guests. It's a great metaphor for the model under which the sheeple in America live. They're plugged into the Matrix, and they don't want to be unplugged. They don't want to know the truth about 9/11 because the truth is far more scary than the official story of some guys than a guy in a cave directing, 18 or 19 other guys with box cutters to do what they did. The truth is far more scary because if our government is willing to do such horrible things, look into Operation Ajax, look into Gulf of Tonkin, look into the other false flag lies that have led to the deaths of many. The sheeple don't want to know it, and at the end of the day, Dave, just as it pertains to your girlfriend or anybody else, they have to want to wake up. They have to want to, and most people just don't. They would rather not know. And I think that is, at the end of the day, what is the plague on our republic, is how do you take it back when people don't want to know the truth?
You know what, though? I think part of it is just it's in the human DNA. I came to the conclusion several years ago that denial is probably the strongest human defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And the fear of death. I mean, I actually, believe it or not, I don't really fear death, so I'm okay to look at the truth about what's going on and what could happen. And I think that it is going to get very dark and ugly in this country, and there's no telling when it's going to happen, but we're clearly a lot closer to whatever's going to happen than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think at the end of the day, I lose patience for those who want to embrace their cognitive dissonance and their normalcy bias. Where I lose patience for those people is that, we need people to champion the cause. We need people to wake up. We need Americans to stand up and march against the Fed, like so many in Germany are doing right now. We need people to stand up and scream out against the $500 billion to the Pentagon for endless unconstitutional war. We need people to stand up and say, more for the people, less for the banks. And what I don't understand, Dave, is that, how do you explain it? What I don't understand is, would these people rather know that they have cancer so that they could start to fight the cancer and get healthy and try to win the battle? Or would they rather not know that they have cancer and just quietly die and let that death be a surprise to them because they never knew they had cancer? Because that's what we're facing. Our nation has cancer. Our government has cancer. Our banking system has cancer. And we need to remove the cancer. We need to kill the cancer.
You know what? There's a very... That's a good way to put it, but there's also kind of an interesting insight on that, and that is, I think people are willing to go to get checkups, a couple times a year to see if they have cancer or not, because in most cases, cancer can be fixed or controlled. But I think a lot of people realize that, it's what can you do about this government? There's really, I don't know what you can do, because the government just has so much control over our lives now, between the NSA, between the use of drones, which apparently now, unbeknownst to the public, unbeknownst to me up until recently, I guess the government, the military now has power to use drones against us. So
Yep.
I think it's just so overwhelming to think about. I do think that if somehow, out of some sort of inertia, there was a mass movement created, I think a lot of people probably would join in on it.
Mm-hmm.
I know I would, but I'm not going to, if I went out into the streets and said, hey, let's go overthrow the state capitol, I don't think I get too many people following me.
Yeah, and we don't want violence. What we want is to take it over from within, and I know a lot of people would argue it's too late for that, and I get it, but if you take a look at what's going on with the Tea Party, to your point, the tyranny that we face, the IRS, the military-industrial complex, our own congressional and senatorial leaders, passing the NDAA. You called it the detainee bill. Well, on New Year's Eve, 2012, who signed it after saying he wouldn't? Barack Obama. What does it allow him to do? It allows him to detain unconstitutionally and without writ of habeas corpus any American citizen that they deem a terrorist in this endless war on terror. And they call the American homeland, how Nazi-esque is that term, the homeland, the battlefield. So anybody that they deem a terrorist, now they can apparently drone strike or detain in a military dungeon without trial. So to your point, it's very, very scary, but I just pray that we reach a tipping point. And I think the Tea Party is one example of that. The Ron Paul Revolution is another example of that. Germans marching against the Fed is another example of that. We reach a tipping point. So I truly believe eventually we're going to hit a tipping point. I just wonder when that'll be. Rory, that's the end of my rant here. Do you want to jump in with any questions before we lose Dave?
Well, I want to back up, and I want to see if some of these things are tied together. And recently, one of the Fed governors, I can't remember his name, but came out and was talking about exit fees on the Treasury bonds. And just prior to that, we had Australia making the announcement that they were seizing $360 million worth of dormant account money. Do you think that any of this stuff is connected? I mean, is this a pattern that is going to lead to the collapse? I mean, as I believe you stated before, Dave, the criminals that are in charge, they love to tell you that they're getting ready to do it to you, and then they do it to you. And I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Oh, there's no question. It's all tied together, and to me, it's all symbolic, or it's all signs of a collapsing system in the United States. As the system collapsed, and this has been we've seen this over and over again in history, and what boggles my mind is that people don't look at history and say, oh, this is what happened, and now all of a sudden it's happening here. That's how Ayn Rand and George Orwell were able to write their books. They looked at history and they were able to see what was coming back in the 1940s. So the signs have been there for many, many decades, and I think now they're becoming blatant and obvious. And the blatant and obvious is the totalitarian creep. I was actually made a list of this because I was thinking about doing a blog post on it. Capital controls. Okay, that's what they were talking about with bond funds, not just exit fees, but redemption gates. Physical gold and silver shortages, extreme fraud and corruption, totalitarian creep, massive money printing, increasing poverty and increasing civil unrest, and unchecked imperialism by our government. And to me, those are all the signals of a collapsing system. And what's scary about it is, and this is, again, it's stood the test of time. It's you just need to look at history, and it's everywhere. When you have a domestic situation that's collapsing, that's when the government clamps down internally on the population, and goes on a military rampage internationally. And the one thing that this is an issue that I've thought about for at least a decade, because we've known that eventually the physical market was going to kind of bust the paper market. But what happens if we get to a point where Germany and Italy and all the other foreign governments say, look, we want our gold back. And we know that the U.S. can't produce that gold. I mean, do you think the U.S. will ever let it get to the point where they actually are forced to open up the vaults and we see that there's nothing but dust in the vaults? I think what's going on here is the U.S. is trying to start wars everywhere to deflect. Part of the reason is to deflect that issue.
Yeah.
Because if Germany's, what is it? They keep 1,500 tons here. If that's missing, how is that ever going to be returned? And I've always kind of felt that the U.S. would start a big war before they ever let the truth out about the physical gold situation in this country.
Yeah, and I just want to be real clear. When you say the U.S., I want to circle back to what Jim Willie said. I want to pin it on the people who are responsible for this, because I think most of the people around the world, and probably the governments, probably Putin himself, no, it's not the American people. Most of the American people are not warmongering monsters. It's this entity that's in control of our government. It's this entity that has seized control of the People's Republic. And I want people to remember that, because a lot of times we'll say, well, we went to Iraq for the oil, or we went to Afghanistan for the heroin, or we did this, or we did that. It's not we. It's not us. It's this entity that's in control of this formerly great nation, which I pray will someday be a great nation again. It's not us.
Oh, I agree with you. It definitely isn't. We've lost control of the government, and it's the people that Jim Willie refers to as the neocons. What's funny is that there was actually a think tank in the basement of the White House, and Reagan would refer to them as the crazies in the basement.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And they were the ones who basically wrote policy papers that we're seeing being implemented now.
That's
right.
Well,
guess what? The crazies in the basement are all the people now who Jim Willie refers to as the neocons. Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld,
Dov Zakheim,
Brzezinski, all these people.
Henry Kissinger.
All of a sudden, during Bush Jr., they asserted control, and they've basically taken control of not just the front end of the government, but the back end via the NSA and the CIA and the Department of Defense.
That's right. And when you say the crazies in the basement under the Reagan administration, two of the crazies were, again, Rumsfeld and Cheney, the two men who secretly came up with the continuity of government plan, kept it secret, and rolled it out on 9/11. So, yeah, I mean, these people they attained all their goals. They rose to the highest positions of power. And then whatever coup took place on 9/11, maybe the final coup, and these people then officially rolled out this COG plan. I guess that's all she wrote. And, boy, I hate to end it on a down note, though. Let's turn this thing around and let's talk about...
I want to just throw one more thing in there, because this is, and I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to your podcast may have already seen it, but Paul Craig Roberts posted an article on his website on June 3rd, and in it he discussed the new military doctrine that basically dictates our Defense Department policy, and that is that deep inside the Defense Department, the people who are in control actually think that the U.S. can win a first strike nuclear war.
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing what's happening in Ukraine and Poland with where the U.S. is trying to create a military bases around Russia and around China, where they put in anti-missile silos, and they do it under the guise of NATO.
That's right.
But that's the primary reason they went into Ukraine the way they did. And the thinking is, if they hit Russia first, their missile bases are in a position to take out Russia's counterstrike.
Well, that's absolutely right, and that's why Putin is pushing back so hard, because he knows he's being surrounded by a NATO, which is controlled by the United States and Europe, And I follow Paul Craig Roberts closely. I listened to his interview with Heinrich on Red Ice Radio recently twice, and he makes that very same point you just made, and he calls it the Wolfowitz Doctrine, because these same people that were in control of the Pentagon and in large degree remain in control of the Pentagon today, but the same people that were in control on 9/11, they rolled out the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which is there should never be, in their estimation, there will never or should ever never be again a nation state that can challenge the power and hegemony of the United States. And that's exactly terrifying, right, because they're willing to do it in any way fit. They are capable of doing a nuclear first strike, and they're also capable of doing false flag nuclear strikes. So it's terrifying stuff when you face the truth. When you face the truth of what happened on 9/11, you realize what these people are capable of. And the Wolfowitz Doctrine and the Zygmunt Brzezinski Doctrine, and the Henry Kissinger Doctrine indicate that these people are madmen. I mean, these are not people in service of humanity or this republic in any way, shape, or form. They're madmen, and they are willing to take us to the brink of World War III.
They're insane with power, I agree. Okay, now we can end on a good note.
All right, let's turn this thing around, because here's the good note, and I'm sincere about this. Here's the good note. Our listeners, all of our listeners, have some physical silver and or some physical gold in their possession. When we know that the world's gold supplies, even in the bullion banks, is being hypothecated and rehypothecated, when we know there's nothing left but paper promises and a lot of people, 100 times at least what there is in the physical world, 100 times more paper promises than there is physical, Dave, the good news is that our listeners have that precious, very truly precious physical in their possession. And that's the good news, because we don't know what's coming, but we know what's coming for those who don't hold physical. We know what's coming for those who only hold paper promises, and it's going to be very dark days for those folks.
Yes, I agree. And I've told people for more than a decade now, if you want to have any hope of seeing, keeping your wealth intact through what's coming at us, the only way to do it is to get out of your paper assets and buy physical gold and silver that you keep under your own possession. That's the only way.
That's right. And, our friend Chris Duane has done some interesting research in the area of what was physical silver valued at back in the days of the Roman Empire. And after much research, he concluded that a day of hard human labor back in the days of the Romans, people were compensated with what equates to 1/10 of 1 ounce of physical silver. 1/10 of 1 ounce. So put that in perspective, guys, as you look at your stack. Back in the day, the compensation was 1/10 of 1 ounce of physical silver for hard human labor. And today,
you don't have to go back that far.
Exactly.
You want to know a better benchmark to use?
Yeah, what?
Take a pre-64 silver dime. In 1963, you could buy a gallon of gas for 10 cents, right? Okay, so flash forward to today, there's probably close to $3, maybe a little more than $3 of silver in a pre-64 dime. And that'll still buy a gallon of gas.
That's right.
Or, well, not quite right now, but
pretty close.
That's a great point. And the people have been removed from their monetary history. Most of the sheeple, I know I use that term a lot, but it's fair. It really is. I hate to say it, but it's fair.
No argument for me.
Yeah. Well, most of the people don't remember or know about the history when not too long ago our money said payable on demand in silver, payable on demand in gold.
Yep.
They were silver notes. They were silver certificates and gold certificates. And most people have completely been removed from that history. And as I like to say, Dave, it's our job to remind them. It's our job to try to help them understand why buying an ounce or buying 20 ounces a tube of Eagles at $20 a pop is a pretty darn good deal.
It's a great deal. That's a steal.
All right, my friend. Well, you've been generous with your time, and I know Rory has interviewed you in the past. You guys could search out, do a Google search for The Daily Coin, Dave Kranzler, and I'm sure you can come up with some of those interviews. It's the first time we've interviewed Dave, but I promise it won't be the last. Dave, can you remind people about your work and your website?
Yes. My website is investmentresearchdynamics.com, and I also have a brand new YouTube channel use it with the same name on it, and we do a short videos called the Golden Truth Report,
Well, thanks so much, Dave. We very much appreciate your time. Rory, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I'd love to come on again.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'd love to have you on again, so we will definitely get you on the calendar. And in the meantime, you guys can check out Dave's site at Investment Research Dynamics. And please do check out sgtreport.com, where we try real hard every day to post the best possible information, the trees that bear fruit, and Dave Kranzler is among those. Dave, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks again for having me.
All right, guys. Take care and have a great one. Bye-bye.